Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start the June 24th, 2024 meeting of the Fairfield RTM. Will the clerk take the roll?
Ken Astorita, Peter Britton, Melissa Longo, Brooke Spiricino, Tara Cook-Littman, Amy O'Shea, Dave Rock, Chris Shea, Mike Hardigan, Jeff Steele, Cindy Waldron, Cindy Wepnixie, Laura Carson, Michelle McCabe, Marcy Spolier, Liz Esma, Josh Garskoff, Kristen O'Neill, Sharon Pastilli, she's here, Jay Walk, Jennifer Barahona, Rob Blanchard, Nancy Donnie, Andrew Graceffa,
Here.
Steve Barretts, John Delgado, John Kuhn, Scott Nickel, Barry Burcham,
Here.
Chris Carroll, Colin Colburn, Christine Libwazak,
Here.
Drew Georgiadis, Lisa Havey, Mark McDermott,
Here.
Karen Wackerman, Matt Ambrose, Justin Contrado, Margaret Horton, Pierre Ratsky.
Thank you, Betsy. Let's stand for the pledge. Thank you. Item 2 on our agenda is to consider and act upon the minutes of the regular meeting held on April 29th, 2024, and the annual budget meeting held on May 6, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Waldron, seconded by Carson. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none from the body, is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. We received the assessor's report on the tax relief for the elderly and the disabled homeowners program at our committee meeting last week, as well as a report from Sustainable Fairfield Task Force. So we'll move on to item number 5 on our agenda. To hear, consider, and act upon the following reappointments to the FairTV Commission as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. David K. Kraft, unaffiliated, 269 Home Fair Drive, term July 2024 to 2027. And Paula J. Kokoza, D. 251 Inwood Road, term July 2024 to 2027. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Wackerman, seconded by Representative Nichols. David Kraft was here last week to tell us a little bit about why he wanted to continue on the FairTV Commission. I can't see, is Ms. Kokoza online? Okay. Is there any discussion on this, seeing Ms. Kokoza is not here? Representative Wackerman.
Karen Wackerman, District 9. I move that we divide the question so that we vote just on Mr. Kraft and hope to hear from Ms. Kokoza soon.
Great. Ms. Wackerman made it first, Pastilli for the second. Is there any discussion on the motion to divide this item? Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. We're voting on the motion to divide the item, separate Mr. Kraft from Ms. Kokoza. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion to divide carries. We'll first consider David Kraft. Let me just, for good order, take a motion for Mr. Kraft. Representative Pistilli, seconded by Representative Carson. Is there any discussion on the appointment, the reappointment of Mr. Kraft? Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. Does anyone know Ms. Kokoza? Just give me one moment and let me see if I have her cell number. I think I just emailed her, but I don't have her cell. PTA days. I'm gonna move that down on the bottom of the agenda. I'm just gonna switch the order in hopes that she comes later. If anyone knows her, our email system might have been wonky last week because we had several committee members we had to like kind of notify on the spot. So we're gonna move on to item number 6, to hear, consider, and act upon the following reappointment to the Ethics Commission as recommended by the Board of Selectmen: William A. Diaz, 3 Democrat, 49 Melville Avenue, term July 2024 to 2024. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Garskoff, second by Representative Wolk. Is there any discussion on this item? Representative Blanchard?
I'd like to make a motion to amend it to July 2024 to July 2024 to July 2026.
Thank you, Representative Blanchard. That was a little typo. So we just have to make an amendment. Representative Carson seconds it. All those in favor of changing the term dates from 2024 to 2026 signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we'll go back to the item with the amended wording of 2024 to 2026. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I think I saw Mr. Diaz online. Thank you so much for serving again.
Thank you.
Moving on, we're going to go to item number 7, to hear, consider, and act upon the following appointment to the Ethics Commission as recommended by the Board of Selectmen: William B. Ferguson, 12 Reynolds Drive, term July 2024 to 2026. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Pistilli, seconded by Representative Zezima. Is there any discussion on this item? Again, just if you have it on the chat, feel free to put in, but I'm seeing none. Is there any comment from the public? I'm sorry if I missed you on a previous motion. Seeing none, I will take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That motion passes unanimously. I'm not sure if Mr. Ferguson's online. He is, but thank you so much for serving on the Ethics Commission. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on to item number 8, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Resolved that the applications received under the Neighborhood Assistance Act, NAA, program are hereby approved, and that the Director of Community and Economic Development is hereby designated as the municipal liaison of the town of Fairfield for this program. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Carson, seconded by Representative McCabe. Is there any discussion on this item? Sorry, we didn't have a consent calendar last week. Seeing none from the body, is there any from the public? Seeing none from the public, we're going to take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item number 9, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Resolved that the program year 50, October 1st, 2024 to September 30th, 2025, Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, Annual Action Plan B, and hereby is approved in the amount of $554,000, which includes entitlement grant funds of $479,237 and program income of $74,763. And further resolve that William A. Gerber, First Selectman of the Town of Fairfield, be and hereby is authorized to execute any and all necessary documents to facilitate the town's receipt of these funds and participation in said CDBG program. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative McCabe, seconded by Representative Waldron. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none from the body, is there any public comment? Seeing none from the public, we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item number 10, resolved that the changes to the rules and regulations of the Town of Fairfield Employees Retirement Plan adopted by the Employees Retirement Board on June 5th, 2024 are rejected. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Astorita, seconded by Representative Horton. Before I get to discussion on this item, I just want to remind everyone that if you vote yes on this item, you're rejecting the contracted changes. If you vote no on this item, you are accepting the changes. Is there any other discussion on this item? Any public comment on this item? Going back, I'm just going to reiterate. If you vote yes on this item, you are rejecting the changes. If you vote no on this item, you are accepting the changes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? No.
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 Any abstentions? That motion fails. Moving on to item number 11, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that the bond resolution entitled, "A Resolution Appropriating $5,750,000 for the costs associated with planning, design, and construction related to the Rooster River Flood Mitigation Project, authorizing grants to finance $2,500,000 of such appropriation, authorizing cost share reimbursements to finance $750,000 of such appropriations, and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance the remaining portion of such appropriation be and hereby is approved." Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Wolk, seconded by Representative Pistilli. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none from the body, is there any public discussion? Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item number 12, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that a reallocation of the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds per the attached Exhibit A, B, and hereby is approved. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Wackerman, seconded by Representative Barretts. Is there any discussion on this? Representative McCabe.
Representative McCabe, District 4. While I'm going to be voting in favor of this ARPA reallocation, I know that there should be around $1.5 million or so left in ARPA even after we make these changes, if that's correct. And I would just like to make an appeal that these funds that are intended to be transformative in nature, that we consider very carefully what we are going to do between now and when they have to be encumbered at the end of this year and spent at the end of December 2026. There are examples from across the state of funds being allocated to public art commission or for arts commissions to spend on public art. We can be allocating these funds to the library for teen mental health programs to replenish their library materials budget, wayfinding signage, historical markers, the Fairfield Museum to do programming around our history with slavery. There is a number of things that are really important that are unorthodox for a lot of the kind of spending that towns do. That's what this money is for. And we have a lot of high quality nonprofits that can make good use of those funds. And so I would ask that we consider that when we address the 1.5 million that's left. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McCabe. Is there any other discussion on this item? Seeing none from the body, any public discussion on this item? Seeing none from the public, we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item number 13, to consider and act upon a motion to waive Rule 32 of the Rules to Regulate the RTM regarding the amendments to the tax relief for the elderly and disabled homeowners ordinance, Section 95-7 to Section 95-15.4 of Chapter 95, Article 3 of the Code of the Town of Fairfield, sponsored by the Senior Disabled Tax Relief Committee. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Pistilli, seconded by Representative Carson. Is there any discussion on this matter? Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Pistilli, District 5. I would like to make a motion to postpone this item to a date certain, like to the July meeting. My understanding is that there was some wording on the agenda that needs to be revised, and therefore we want to make sure that we provide the public with adequate notice before voting on the item. And we've also conferred with the tax assessor, and approving this in July will not have any impact.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Representative McCabe. Is there any discussion on the motion to postpone to a date certain, which would be our July 2020 or July 22nd meeting? Seeing none, any other discussion from the public? Seeing none, we're voting on the motion to postpone to our July 2022 meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So we'll see that in our July meeting. Thank you. We just want to make sure the wording on that, I goofed up a little bit, and I appreciate that, so we can give the public their chance if they want to say anything. Moving on to item number 14 on our agenda, the ethics ordinance remains held in LNA. So we will move on to item number 15, to form a committee to review the rules to regulate the RTM. Do I have a motion for this? Representative Rock, seconded by Representative Nichols. Is there any discussion on this item from the body? Go ahead, Representative Steele.
Jeff Steele, District 3. I didn't even know this was on the agenda, but I think it's an absolutely crucial thing we do. The rules regulating for the RTM are dated. There are many gaps, and I think we could do this together. I think it's a great thing to put forward. Much long overdue.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the body? Any discussion from the public? All right, let's take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. So our SLMC committee will have to call a meeting to form that committee. We're going to move on to item number 16, resolve. Do I have a second to forego? Representative Carson has made a motion to forego the reading. Representative Wackerman seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The reading is waived. Is there any discussion on the flood and erosion board? Oh, I'm sorry. Now, I'm making a motion on, since the waive reading, but is there a motion to approve item number 16? Representative Wackerman, seconded by Representative Pistilli. Any discussion on this item? Representative Wackerman.
Karen Wackerman, District 9, if I can. I'd like to make a motion to amend this a little. The wording was a little off for what the RTM should resolve. So I'd like to make a motion to change the beginning to read, resolved that the RTM shall prepare a proposed ordinance that alters the organization of the existing flood and erosion control board, et cetera. I don't know if I need to read all of it, but.
Do I have a second? Representative Horton, is there any discussion on Representative Wackerman's motion to amend the wording? Basically, it's just because we will be agreeing to develop an ordinance on this. We're not voting on the ordinance at this point. Any discussion from the body? Seeing none, any discussion from the public? Seeing none, we're voting on the motion to amend. All those in favor signify of the amendment, say aye. If anyone needs it read. All right. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? That motion carries. Betsy, do you need the wording? Okay, great. So now we will move back to item number 16 as amended. Do I have a motion to approve? Yeah. Go ahead, Representative Steele. Oh, can we just actually, can we vote on, and then we can.
Vote on what, though? I think as it was written, it was correct and proper because it was coming through the charter from the Board of Selectmen. I think that was okay. It was a resolution to us that once we put an ordinance form would enact those 4 changes. But now that we changed the wording, I don't know if there's any action item because it's now saying, hey, RTM, can you put forward an ordinance? I don't really know.
I think we're voting on that we're going to put forward the ordinance. Any other discussion or answer to Representative Steele, Representative Wackerman?
Yeah, I think, yeah, we're going to do that. I just don't know why we have to vote on that.
Just to make it formal.
Karen Wackerman, District 9. I see your point, but I think it represents a commitment to do this. It's on the record, and I think since the Board of Selectmen asked us to do it, probably is a good idea.
All right, I'm just gonna take a motion for it, and then we can discuss further if not. Representative Pistilli, seconded by Representative Carson. Is there any discussion on this item as amended? Any discussion from the public on this item? Seeing none, let's take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. So we will have to get, in our backup, it's pretty much developed, that ordinance, but we'll have to see if we just send that to LNA for revisions or if there's sponsors that want to get on board for that. So moving on to item number 17, resolve that in accordance with Public Act 23-5, an act implementing early voting, the representative town meeting of the town of Fairfield shall establish 2 polling locations for early voting. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Pistilli, seconded by Representative Wolk. Is there any discussion on this item? Representative Steele.
Jeff Steele, District 3. Excuse me. Sorry I missed last week's meeting, so I guess my comments on this, I'm late to the party. I'm not really sure I understand the reason to have 2. But with the assumption that the reason is to allow equal access or more access, I don't really understand that because there are 14 days to vote. We have 1 central location. It is half the cost, half the number of moderators, half the police presence, half the security, half the confusion, half the chaos, and double the security. I mean, I just think many reasons are going through my head, but the ones I just mentioned, by having 2, it doubles the potential problems. But mostly, I don't understand why we need 2. Why do we need to spend another $10,000 to do this? I don't get it. People have 14 days to drive to the grocery store, and they could stop by and do early voting. So to me, this is an easy thing to cut. This is an easy thing to not spend $10,000 on, plus the security, and to pull our police or security presence away from other things to now do that. I'm not sure I buy into that. Also, I got this document today, 1:39 p.m. from Mr. Wagner. It's a pretty detailed document of data and charts and files and questions, but it was only signed by Mr. Wagner. Through you, Madam Moderator, I just want to ask Registrar Kathy Politi if she has seen this. Was she able to weigh in on this? Did she comment? Did she add to it? Or is this just from Mr. Wagner?
Kathy, if you want to come on up, Ms. Politi. Take your time.
Oh, sorry.
I got it.
Okay, thank you. This was not sent to me. I saw it through Marcy, and I was not aware of this document, until Marcy sent it to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other?
So just as a follow-up, so you haven't had obviously a chance to go through it and digest it and agree with it or not agree with it?
I looked it over briefly. We had not discussed using our staff, the registrars or the deputy registrars at early voting, because we do have to maintain office hours as well. Also,
Sold it.
Okay, thank you. The numbers in the chart for the early voting plan worksheet, those numbers, those are not concrete. Those are just guesstimates. So, and I think they're way over. They said to expect 30%. So we're looking at maybe 10,000, which is a lot less than that. And we still even haven't discussed how we're going to staff it. We haven't agreed on anything yet. So to me, one location is much easier. And if it was central, that would be best. There'd be police costs that Alex had mentioned. And, oh, I'm sorry, it's his son. And also the other thing with that was we budgeted only for one moderator, one location. 14 moderators, but one location in the budget. So,
Thank you.
As just a follow-up to that, I just the first page, I see a bunch of costs here at the bottom, and I don't know what that is. It says 37,000 total funding budget for just this.
Mr. Wagner, do you want to come up and explain that?
Certainly. Hello, everyone, and my apologies for the lateness. I was anticipating a much later appearance for us, as you probably did as well. So the question was concerning these numbers for total budgeted. So between our different positions that we have in our office, as well as staff, we've budgeted specifically for early voting, as well as grant funds that have currently been sent to us by the state, not including grants that are described in the text that we have not yet received from the state. Our staffing funding for that period of time would come to that amount, 37,391.
Okay, so as a follow-up, was there a reason this was not checked with Ms. Politi? Why did this get sent out unilaterally? I'm just curious. Don't you work together to represent all voters? I don't understand.
Yeah, I'd say so. These are figures that are from our budget. We work together for the constituents of the town in much the same way that the RTM does, right? We have our own ideas, our own proposals, and then we come together and have to agree on them. And that's how it works in the office, as well as I'm sure it does here.
Yeah, except here we debate and discuss amongst each other. So are you saying then that this is sort of your interpretation of what needs to happen or is happening, or is this collectively yours and Ms. Politi's?
So as you know, we have different proposals for what we'd like to see the RTM approve tonight, and as well as different ideas about how early voting should work. And I'll say that in our first communication to the RTM, we discussed making a joint recommendation in a single memo that we would both sign. And Ms. Politi decided that she would prefer not to do that we should communicate separately. It's sort of with our own sets of ideas. So I think both are appropriate. So I've sort of followed that template just for this matter that's before you today.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be clear, sort of the intention of that. Okay, thank you. No, I'm okay, unless
You
someone
can
else
come
might
up
have.
later at public comment or if there's any other questions.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like the right thing to do with a bipartisan or, registrar's office to just put a memo. Anyways, we read it and now we know what he was thinking, but we didn't hear the other side. And of course we did just now, but we hadn't in that memo. So I think there's just so many wild cards and question marks as to why I still don't know why we're doing two sites. So I'm going to make an amendment to change the wording to propose one site.
Representative Steele has made an amendment to propose one site. Do I have a second? Representative Britton. Any discussion on the amendment? Do you want to, well, you pretty much explained yourself. So yeah, any discussion on the amendment to change it to one site? Representative Pastelli.
Sharon Pastilli, District 5. So because this is a wild card and we do not know the number of voters to expect. And geographically, we're a pretty large town. It does make sense to have more than one polling location. We are a democracy. A lot is on the ballot this coming November, including, the future of our democracy. So I am in favor of two locations and not one.
Thank you, Representative Pistilli. Is there any Representative Estrada?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ken Estrada, District 1. I guess my question is to Matt and Kathy. Are there other towns that have multiple early voting locations?
I'm just going to repeat what Ms. Pistilli is saying, just because it's hard for her to walk up. She's saying that, Ms. Pistilli is saying not that she's aware of in the state. And Mr. Wagner, if you want to come on up, you can. If you want to come up, you can too, but.
Thank you. I'll say that right now, we have not yet heard what other towns are doing. We've talked to a few of the larger towns and know that that many of them are doing a single location. I'll say that I provided in the materials from last week national averages in terms of what jurisdictions all over the country experience in terms of number of early voting sites relative to the number of voters, both for towns and counties of all sizes, as well as jurisdictions of approximately Fairfield size. So 3 to 5 would be in keeping with those national norms. I'll also just say that within Connecticut, even if every single jurisdiction did have a single location, we would still see an average number of voters per early voting location of about 13,000. So, 2.2 million voters, 169 towns, that's how the math works out for that. So if Fairfield had 3, we would have the average number for Connecticut, even if every other town in Connecticut did have 1.
So I guess the long way to that question, though, is that there's no other towns that have multiple early voting places. And I guess this is about access, correct? So we want to make it as easy and as simple for people to vote. But I guess when I look at it, we're asking people to drive, maybe an extra couple of miles? I don't know that that's outrageous. This polling place will be open for 14 days, including 4 days over the weekend. So I think there's ample opportunity from a convenience standpoint where somebody who wants to vote early could be able to do that. And I also have questions regarding ballot security, because we've seen fraud in this state just very recently, right next door. My understanding is the register will be kept on the hard copy paper book, if you will, so that book in essence will need to be at multiple sites. So what's the process to prevent fraud with respect to somebody voting at one location, getting in their car, driving 2 miles to the other location and voting again? Is there a
Mr. Wagner, you want to come answer that?
Absolutely, and thank you. I think that's a great question. I think what people may not be aware of is that the official list in terms of who's marked as voting is our centralized voter registration system. It has to be entered online in the system that all registrars use at the same time, and no ballot can be counted until it's been logged in there as someone having voted. So when each person appears at an early voting site, they will be marked on the computer as voting. And if they were to go to a second site, we would see that they had already voted when they appeared at that second site.
Ms. Politti's coming up to answer as well. If someone wants to move a chair closer to for her, that's fine. I'm guessing this is not your last rodeo up here.
I have that feeling, yeah. I just wanted to let everybody know that I have submitted something to the Secretary of State's office, and they have not responded yet regarding, they want us to have the paper lists. That's the guidance that they have now at the early voting locations. But if you do that, you cannot really do it with multiple locations. So they haven't responded yet. And also, the early voting module still has the previous election stuff on there. And poll workers can issue multiple ballots for the same election. But I haven't gotten guidance on that yet.
Thank you.
My last question for Matt and Kathy. Sadly, in the environment that we're in, we've seen a lot of political violence lately. Is there a plan for the physical security? Have you had an opportunity to discuss with the Secretary of State, Department of Homeland Security, local police with respect to what that's going to look like?
Thank you. I'll say that we recently had a workshop with the organized by the State Department of Homeland Security as well as local first responders discussing different types of violence or disruptions that could happen in the voting process. So we have begun discussing our plans for how we would respond to the types of modern threats that you're seeing now. In terms of the physical security of the ballots, our plan has been, I believe remains, to return the ballots at the close of each day from early voting sites to the vault in our office. So in terms of security of the voted ballots, which is something obviously that is at a higher level than other types of materials that we would have, those are locked under a dual lock key, system in our office.
So is it fair to say, though, that there's going to be additional expense to the Fairfield Police to keep these sites secure?
In my opinion, yes, I believe so, that it would. I don't know, David, if you have any thoughts on this because you're part of the emergency team.
Mr. Becker, if you want to come on up, you can take my podium.
On that end, I would just say whatever is implemented and voted, the public safety team across emergency management, police, et cetera, will do what is necessary. So.
Yeah, no, I have no doubt that you guys are going to do what's necessary. I think we have a great police force in town, so that's not my concern. My concern is the cost and the time that would be involved. So if you need to take officers off of their normal patrols and have them stationed outside polling stations, one, there's obviously a cost of that potentially with respect to overtime, or the cost could be that these officers aren't out on the streets where they're supposed to be. I mean, I think we just had a shooting in town just yesterday, as a matter of fact. So there's costs obviously involved here that aren't even on any chart that Matt and Kathy have put together. I think just from a common sense standpoint, having one location that's open for 14 days in the center of town is certainly reasonable and should be convenient enough for anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Wackerman.
Thank you, Karen Wackerman, District 9. I actually was interested in even more than 2 voting places, and I wanted to talk about why I think 2 is a very good idea. This is Connecticut's first time trying this, so we don't know how many voters will use early voting, but I think we should have at least 2 places to make sure that there are options and that people can try it, cannot have to drive from Greenfield Hill down to wherever Town Hall or whatever it is. So it's really not a very big difference in price, as I understand it. I know there's been talk about security and voter fraud. Voter fraud is actually very rare in reality, and there's no real reason for us to think it's going to happen for early voting. There's going to be regular voting in November, and will we need lots of police then too at 10 locations? I don't know. I mean, I think that's worrying about something that hasn't happened here and is unlikely to happen here. Same with the violence and with the paper list. There's 45 other states do this. I can't believe that people haven't figured out how to deal with a paper list. They'll figure it out. So that's not a reason not to have 2 locations. So I will be supporting this motion enthusiastically. Thanks.
Just to clarify, the motion is for 1 voting place. So I think you meant to say you're not supporting.
I will not be supporting this motion enthusiastically.
Thank you. Representative Horton.
Hi, Margaret Horton, District 10. Sorry, I've hit the point where I can't actually read my own writing without my glasses. So I think that these are really understandable concerns about cost, et cetera. You know, obviously in Connecticut, we don't have a lot of data to go on, but actually we do have a lot of data to go on from across the country, being that we're a late state to adopt this. I've actually been doing kind of a lot of research about this over the last week or so. It's just something I'm interested in. And a couple different things. One is that the research overwhelmingly shows that early voting does increase voter turnout. Sometimes the research is broken against number of polling locations, sometimes not, but the general equation is more polling locations equals more voters. I think that that's something that all of us, regardless of any political affiliation, could agree on, that it really is worth the investment to increase accessibility for people to vote. It just gives us a more engaged citizenry, which we all get benefit from. In terms of the concerns about violence, and if Mr. Becker or anybody has different information, please tell me. But to the best of my knowledge, Fairfield has had a history of overall safe elections at multiple polling sites, and generally police are not stationed all day at polling locations. So I don't know why that would need to be different in an early voting location. Again, with across the country, in the research, I haven't seen a ton of information about any incidents of violence in early voting. So I think it's important that we consider it. But so far from states across the country that have been doing this, it doesn't seem like those are going to be issues.
Thank you, Representative Horton. Representative Zezima.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Liz Esma, District 4. Representatives Horton and Wackerman did mention many of the things I was going to say, and I want to thank everybody for their, comments, their opinion. I'm not going to be supporting Representative Steele's motion. I thank him for making it. I do think a town our size would benefit tremendously from 2 locations. It is our first time doing this. We're making some educated assumptions at this point. I'm not connecting with political violence anywhere that we should be concerned about, although perhaps the registrars can explain to us what discussions they've had with the police and what, if any, costs they might be, allocating to this process, because you certainly would have to be worried then about the primary in August. And then my final comment is, I understand there's a question about submitting information to the body. And I would, certainly welcome from Registrar Politi that we receive all of her independent data and analysis and whatever study she has done in order to support her preference for 1 location.
Thank you, Representative Zezima. Representative Rock.
Dave Rock, District 2. Jeff, I can't support 1, but I do like 2, and I don't like 3. And I think that it's a great compromise to land on 2 when we had, both of our registrars say 1 and 3. I mean, I thought it was a no-brainer to go 2, and so I like 2. A couple other comments here. I do have full faith in our police department if they are necessary, and I think that Fairfield's been pretty active in that respect. So I kind of like that. I don't think there's an added expense there. I looked at Matt's pass out, and his schedule and the way he has it set up is very flex. So days, hours, manpower. People come in, people go out depending upon volume. And so I think, it's smart. I do think that there are a lot of people who would benefit from two locations, one being north, one being south. Not everybody has a car, and people do rely on public transportation. So I think it's smart to have more than one. I just couldn't wrap my brain around three. And I do think somewhere in between, 12,000, 10,000, 14,000, we should be able to do that. I didn't see any Kathy proposal. I think it's really too early for us to compare ourselves to other towns. We just don't have that information yet. So whether they have one or two or three polling places, I just don't think we've landed yet because this is our first time out. I think that's it. I would hope that the places that are picked are good places. And I'm hopeful that we can get two being the perfect compromise. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the motion to amend to one? Representative Longo.
Hi, Melissa Longo, District 1. I have a couple things. One is that, if we're looking at the national scale, I don't know, that doesn't make me 100% comfortable knowing that we have cities that are larger than ourselves in the state who have not committed to any polling locations for early voting yet. And I think that we're all saying this is the first time that we're doing this. Why would we start with two? It makes more sense to start with one, see how many people are showing up, see how many voters are actually turning out, to see if we actually, in fact, need a second location. It makes little sense to me to have two locations where they're, again, we're doing this for the first time. So we have people who've never done this before, excuse me, for 14 days of early voting, giving people two locations. If this was a span of 3 or 4 days, I could understand two locations. However, having 14 days on the weekends, being the size of the town that we are, having only done this one time, it doesn't make sense to me to incur the extra cost considering our taxes all just went up. And it's just kind of like throwing money out the window. I don't understand, our police are taxed enough. It seems like we're just using resources and not the best way possible. I also was curious to see if anyone has spoken to the police department about how this would look, knowing that they don't, sit at every polling location the entire day, what that would look like, if it would be, however many officers on and off, is this overtime? How is this going to affect them? And I also have a question about the ballots. If it's early voting for this election, what do the ballots look like? So if someone, now that we don't need an ID to vote, how do you know which representative you're voting for in which district for the state and election? I'm just curious about that because that was not in the email.
Can one of you answer that? So I think your question is like, if someone shows up, how do you know if they're representing, which representative they're voting for, which district they're in?
I believe the way Matt wants it done, and he said the statute reads, the Early Voting Act, is that you can go to any early voting location and vote at anyone you want. So that's the problem with the lists. Each location is going to have the same lists, which doesn't make sense. So you wouldn't know who's voted at the other location. So that's why I'm still waiting for the answer from the Secretary of State on how that would even work. It doesn't make sense to me. There's going to be, as of now, 22 different ballot styles. You're going to have 11, because there's 11 locations, and they have to be by district. And then there's going to be 11 same-day registration ballots. So they'd be completely separate. So it's going to be very confusing for people, working there. That's why one location would be easier to control.
Mr. Wagner, do you want to respond at all?
Sure. I guess I'll just say when people arrive, what the act, as Ms. Palese mentioned, says that people will check in by computer, right? That records who has been issued a ballot. The Secretary of State's office has asked us to have paper lists as backups, and we would consult that in the instance, for example, that the computer system went down or the power went out or something of that nature. So people could be issued ballots while we didn't have electricity or while we didn't have access to the internet or something of that nature. And so that, people, we would see which ballot they would receive and which candidates would be on the ballot they receive when we look them up on the computer. And if not, we would look them up on the paper list, issue the ballot, and when access to the internet or power was restored, we would enter that ballot in the computer as having been issued, and we would be able to match it to say, oh, this person was previously issued a ballot or something of that nature, in the unlikely event that that were to happen.
I'm not sure that answered my question. I just want to say that all the cities in the state, are not planning on any more than one location from my understanding of what's happening here. I also find it very concerning that our registrars are not working together on this, that one person is being purposefully left off certain emails. I don't understand that. We are all on the same email together as a body. I would hope that in a situation where, we have voting, that this is a very important election. Every election is important, and that the two of you would know what each other's stance is on this issue, along with many others. It just seems a little bit silly to me that we should expect Kathy to send one thing to everyone and then not include Matt, just like Matt included it to everyone and didn't consult Kathy. She's a registrar as well in that office, and they should be treated the same. And I find it very concerning that the only way that Kathy found out about this email today that we received at 1:37 was through our moderator. I don't understand why you wouldn't consult the person that you're working with and ask her or talk to her about, this is what I'm planning on sending out, just as like a courtesy and a respectful heads up.
Let's stick to the how many locations. That isn't.
There should be one location. Again, like I said, it doesn't make any sense to open two. I think that if we start with one, calculate the numbers, let's see where we are and go from there. And well, something needs to be said about the lack of communication. It's important. Thank you.
Representative Shea.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Chris Shea, District 2. I'm in favor of this motion for one location. I've worked in the past at the different polling locations, and things can be a bit confusing, and I think simplification is important. We want each and every person to vote, and we want their vote to count. It's really, really important to me that everyone has access to a polling location, and I believe early voting is a great thing, and we now have it in Connecticut, and as a result of the legislature. And 14 days is an awful long time to be able to get to a polling location, whether there's one or two or six. In Fairfield, I think one location is perfectly adequate. I'm also a little bit concerned about the fact that we have our representatives in districts 132, 133, and 134. And, when you go on election day to your polling location, you have a ballot for that particular polling location, which is the ballot for that representative. Now that we're having early voting, we're going to have a bunch of different ballots at the early voting location. And it just seems to me to add a bunch of confusion. So if you're adding more than one early voting location, you're just doubling the potential confusion. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. I also am concerned about the logistics of getting the numerous ballots from the maybe two locations back and having them they have to be brought back each night and they have to be secured. And I just worry about the logistics of that. So for those reasons, I'm in favor of the one polling location for early voting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Representative Wipnitsky. Did I say that right?
Okay. Okay. Cindy Wapnitsky, District 3. Initially, I was for 3 polling locations, but I think 2 is a good idea. I think that we should make it, we should, as a body, we should be making it as easy as possible for people to vote because we want as many people to come out and vote because that is our democratic process. Now, I have to say that I was a little disturbed by the idea of voter fraud. Voter fraud is, I will give you these statistics, okay? In the 2020 election, there were 1,513 cases of criminal fraud in the US. There were 1,284 convictions. There were 58 civil penalties. That's out of how many people voted in the 2020 election? 130, 140 million people. That's small. So to use the idea of voter fraud as a reason to only have one location, I find to be disturbing. And that's it.
Thank you. Representative Colburn.
Colin Colburn, District 8. I have a question for both of the registrars. Will we be voting on number of locations for early voting in every election going forward?
I would say that's the, would be a question for the moderator, the wording of the resolution that's before you. I imagine that's something that you could decide.
The number, when you guys came to us, you said that it was recommended by the, somebody at the state level recommended it to you that you guys come to us no matter whether it's 1 or 3. I asked that last week, I believe.
Right, it's really up to the Secretary of State. Up to this point, they've asked us for each election to submit a new early voting plan, which would include what this legislature, decides. So right now, I don't believe it's in the act itself, but I believe that's what we're headed for is each time we would come before you.
Even if, because originally I thought maybe if you both agreed on one, that you wouldn't have to come before us. That's not the case.
You guys will always be determined.
So if you both agreed on 2, you would still have to come before us for us to determine 2.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer your question?
It does. And then I had a comment, which was I'm in favor of Representative Steele's motion for 1. I think it's clear. I think it's easy. I think it's just the most efficient way. And also, first of all, I commend what the state legislature did by giving us early voting. I think we're behind when it comes to that. So I'm very happy that they did that. And since they did just do that, by what I can read from the Secretary of the State, there is no recommendation for more than 1. So we're really going against what is written in the recommendation from the Secretary of the State. So for that reason, I don't see why we should be adding extra complexity on top of something that's already a good thing and it's new and it's our first time doing it. And back to the point that I just asked, if we determine that we do need more early voting locations, we can do that. We can do that next time. So I'm in favor of the motion.
Thank you. I think Representative Ludwig's online. I just want to remind members online to put it in the chat if you want to speak, because we can't see everyone's hands up. But Representative Ludwig, I think your hand's been up. I'm not sure.
Yes. Hi. Sorry about that. Thank you, moderator. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Yes. Okay. Christine Ludwigsack, District 8. I did want to just voice I am in favor of Representative Steele's motion for one polling location. For a point of clarification, Mr. Wagner, I think last week had mentioned that the systems do go down not infrequently. Is that accurate? Could that maybe be spoken to if there are two locations, kind of how that would be handled, especially the reliance on the paper for the same day registration?
Go ahead, Mr. Wagner.
Thank you. I'll say that, yes, it's our experience that the system will become unresponsive probably once a week on average. And during the busiest times of the year, that happens more frequently. My hope is that the state would allocate additional resources to make sure that that didn't happen. But I think that we certainly need a plan that accommodates that possibility. What would happen if someone comes in and the computer system were down for whatever reason is that we would consult the paper list to determine whether they were registered or not. Right. So you have to know, is someone registering in that transaction or are they already registered? So anyone submitting a ballot during that time that the computer is out of service, we would separate their ballot and we would log it back into the computer when the system was available to us. So the question that we have to answer, like operationally on an early voting day, is when someone comes in, are they already registered or do they need to fill out a new voter registration card? Right. So we put them into process A or process B, and that paper list tells us that. The computer system, when we return to it, tells us whether they have already received a ballot, whether that's an absentee ballot or an early voting ballot. Even if you only had one location and you could say, well, we only have one paper list, that list does not tell you whether someone received an absentee ballot in the interim, and it doesn't tell you if they had previously been registered in another town and potentially voted early in that town as well. So the computer is really the checkpoint that we have to use before submitting the ballot into the counting process. So we say, okay, this person has not received a ballot before, and now we're logging it in the computer, and now it's being set into our storage to be counted on election day, right? Until it goes through the computer, we cannot record that the ballot was received. So the paper list just tells us which process to use for the voters that do arrive during that time.
Okay, so then once the system is back up, you'd be able to verify any or rule out any potential voter fraud.
Certainly, the double voting is what you're detecting with that. That's right.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I think Ms. Politi wanted to comment on that too.
Also, you have to make sure that they actually are registered and everything. So I just don't see if we have to use the paper lists and there's multiple locations, how that's even going to work. Again, even the Secretary of State can't answer me yet on that. So.
Thank you. Representative McCabe.
Michelle McCabe, District 4, through you, Madam Moderator. I do have a question for the registrars. When is the deadline for you to submit your early voting plan to the Secretary of State for the early voting for the general election?
Thank you. Who wants to go first?
I believe it's September 5th, 60 days beforehand. So we're actually late on the August one.
When I looked on the Secretary of State's website, the data on towns and cities making a decision for the general election early voting sites is not publicly available, and apparently it's not due yet. So I think anyone who's claiming what towns are or are not doing for early voting for the general election, the information is actually not available yet. Number two, also in the early voting website on the Secretary of State's area, there is a recommendation that states that any towns, If the population is 20,000 or more, the local legislative body will decide whether to have additional locations, i.e. the recommendation is there that it's worth considering, and for a town of 62,000 people, I think it makes perfect sense to not have one location, but in fact to have two. And then finally, it also is on the early voting website that when you go to register to vote, your name is looked up on the registered list, and that is how they determine which ballot to hand you, so that people who are voting for each of the representatives, for example, will receive a correct ballot, similar to when you go to town hall and ask for an absentee ballot. You get the correct one, you don't get the wrong district. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other members that haven't spoken yet? Any in the chat? Representative Steele, did you want to speak again? Go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
There was a survey sent out, and it was all of Fairfield County, and they are all doing one location for early voting. I spoke to Hartford, who was also doing one location. There's Waterbury. There is none that are having two, and they have started thinking about it already.
Thank you. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Jeff Steele, District 3. I'm glad you mentioned that, Ms. Pleady, because I was going to ask what you knew, and that's some large towns: Hartford, Bridgeport, Stamford, Stratford, Waterbury, Greenwich, who are not having more than one. I'm not sure what I really like this discussion. I think it's great. We're debating it and discussing. I really do. Another one of these good topics to bat around. I still have not heard a compelling reason to do this. I mean, I've listened all night, and I don't hear a good reason. The one reason, again, early access for two locations so everyone can access it. I know it's been said, but if this were 1 or 2 days, then it would be somewhat understandable. 14 days. In 14 days, people are going grocery shopping. 14 days, people are going to CVS. They're dropping off their kids. They're doing this, they're doing that. It's not 14 days. People aren't going out of their house. 14 days, you're going across town. Everybody is. So I don't find that as a compelling argument. Then, should this body decide on two, or two, then we're gonna have the whole debate on where. So then it's gonna be double the debate. But we're gonna have that discussion, or I'm not sure even how it's determined where that 1 or 2 places will be, but undoubtedly it comes before us, I think. So there's that. But I just think this certainly doesn't have to be a political issue, and I'm not saying it is, and I'm not saying everyone says it is, but it just kind of seems that that's where the discussion is going. And I don't even know what political justification there is to go 1 or to go 2. I don't have any. I look at the logic of this. We're all practical people. We're all reasonable people. We have one location. This is the first year it's being done, somewhat experimental. Why don't we try one location, see what the demand is, see what the response is, see how it goes, instead of going all out and doing 2. It does double the cost. Like, do we care about that? It does double the cost. It's another $10,000, probably more, and it does. It forces the police to have to double up their security. Is there more chance for fraud? Sure, there's more chance for everything, right? Is there going to be fraud? I don't think so. I'm not planning that there would be, but it does create potentially more chaos. It's just more potential for something to happen. It is a very heated political season. It's a heated environment around the country right now. It's heated politically. So why tax the police and security in ways we don't need to? So I'm weighing this on the practicality of it. So in the end, let's simplify it. This doesn't have to be political, doesn't have to be anything else, but let's simplify it. And
I'm sorry, Representative Steele. Representative Wackerman's making a motion to call the question.
Okay, well, I'm going to finish because I have a right to finish, and this was my motion, so I'm going to finish that. I think the issue is that the practicality of it is outweighed by the increase in cost, the increase in chaos, the doubling up of everything else. And I just don't see the reason for it. Let's start with one. We're going to have early voting. Start with one. It's manageable. We don't have any of these problems we just all talked about. There's no other reason I've heard tonight that's compelling. If it were 1 day or 2 days, that would make some sense. 14 days. So I just ask us to vote for, with our financial head on, as well as just what's practical. And it is still fair for town people. It's totally fair. 14 days. So thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a second to call the question? Representative Carson. I'm going to take a vote to call the question. I believe we need a 2/3 vote. I believe, is that? Yep. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 If you're opposed, raise your hand or say aye. Representative Havey and anyone else opposed? No. Okay, so the motion to call the question passes. We got to go to public comment. Public comment on the motion to make one voting location. If there's any members of the public online that would like to make a public comment, please put it in the chat. If there's any members present, you can go up to the podium. Mr. Wagner would like to make a motion or make a comment. You feel free as a member of the public to come up to the podium. Put your name and your address. Oh, I'm sorry, and we're going to give you a 2-minute time limit. Thank you.
My name is Dick Mahusky. I live on Colonial Drive. I think Representative Steele's keep it simple argument is a very good one, and I would urge you to just go with the one polling place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to speak? You come on up to the podium, state your name, your address, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Damon, 348 Lakeview Drive in Fairfield, Connecticut. I agree with Mr. Steele. I only support one location. This is the first time we are doing this. Everything should be central. If we're using another facility that is not part of town of Fairfield, we are using their internet access, and we don't know how secure that is. Another reason is same-day registration. So obviously, the university students were fine and able to go to Old Town Hall to register the same day and vote the same day. If somebody goes to a second polling location where they're not having same-day registration, then they're going to be inconvenienced and have to go downtown. It is a civic duty to vote. No one should be felt like they are put out because they have to go across town. Are they going to demand a second town hall at the other side of town because it's inconvenient for them? It's ridiculous. Everything should be central. This is the first time we're doing early voting. Everything should be secure, safe, and in the offices. And we will have both representation of Republicans and Democratic there because they will both be in the building. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would wish to speak? I'm going to let, if there's any members on the public online, I'm going to give each registrar another opportunity to come up. I'm going to limit your time to 5 minutes each. So if you would like to come up and answer any questions that have been brought forward or any discussion, feel free. So I'm not sure which one of you wants to go or if you both want to speak. Mr. Wagner and Representative Horton's going to time you 5 minutes.
You know, I thought of how I could do it in two. So let me just, not to revisit everything about my job, but registrar of voters, what we do in a sense is everything we do all year round is to minimize the amount of activity that we need to do on election day. It's to spread that work over 365 days so that we can apply effort and attention to problems that come up on election day to the maximum extent practical. And so, what early voting does is it has a lot of people voting prior to election day to minimize and spread out the number of questions we get from them. And I'll also say it allows us to register people in a way that we wouldn't be able to, like that people think of registering at the last minute. There was a reference to last year, a large number of college students coming to Election Day registration and participating. And I'm excited about that, right? I want as many people to vote. I get up in the morning to help people vote, right? That's what excites me about the job. But I'll say that I'm very concerned about the possibility of a number 3 times or 5 times as large as that appearing on election day, right? University students saying, well, it's election day, I didn't register or vote, I didn't vote in my family's hometown, so I'm gonna come down and vote. And when we talk about chaos, the idea of having 1 versus 2 locations doesn't concern me because we have 10 locations that we use on election day every year. We're used to managing 10 different sites from our office, right? That's what we do. I'm worried about what happens if you try and push 1,000 people a day through town hall to vote, right? If you say, well, we're going to have 13 people on site, and on a typical weekday, there's like fewer than 5 parking spaces at that building. So what are voters going to do when that's the service level that they're encountering? What happens if there is a disruption and we only had 1 location and now the service is completely unavailable, right? To me, those are the types of chaos that I worry about. And when we're talking about our election day operation, you say, okay, well, we have election day registration that we're going to do. University students may come to use it, I think, unless we offer an organized way for them to vote in a way that parcels it out over a longer period of time. If that's the service that we provide, I think that we can minimize that sort of risk factor of what happens on election day. But also remind you that we've never done election day registration at town hall in a presidential year, right? In 2020, we distributed it across all 10 of our polling places. And we also distribute our absentee ballot counting and the larger number of ballot envelopes that we needed to handle in 2020 over all 10 polling locations. We're talking about a situation where we are going to have dozens of workers at town hall counting ballots and trying to register people to vote. And I'm not sure anyone would be able to access the building. So when I'm making the proposal to people to say to do 3 or at least to have multiple is to say, how do we minimize the amount of things that we're having to deal with on election day and handling and anticipating that volume, service volume, the voter volume that we're talking about in a way that we can handle it, right? Because that's, to me, the best advantage of early voting is minimizing the number of things that can go wrong on election day. And so that's why I propose multiple, right? That security, to my mind, is about resiliency and redundancy and making sure that whatever happens, we're able to continue providing the service to people. So any 1 location I think would be really challenging in terms of the staff you would need to handle the throughput that any other state is experiencing with early voting. And whether that number is 8,000 or 10,000 or 12,000 or 14,000, are we going to be prepared for it? So I hope that you do pass a plan that allows us to do that, that does help us sort of minimize the risk of a large student wave coming on election day itself, which is something that I'm not sure that we're going to be prepared for with 1 location. And if people do have any other questions or recommendations for us, I'm grateful for all the time and attention that people have spent on the matter in the last week. I'm getting the high sign. So please do continue to engage with us. I did hear one comment from Representative Longo that I wanted to speak to, which is that we certainly discussed the memo and the contents of it for most of the day in the office today. I sent it out a short while after Ms. Politi went to an appointment, but certainly what was being discussed in there, even if the numbers specifically were not something that were in front of her, we spent most of the day discussing it. So we do work in the same space and communicate. And, like the RTM, we come from sort of different political factions and have our own strategies and such. And I think that people here would understand that. So
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Ms. Politi.
Thank you. I just want to say that was not discussed today. And, there were other people in the office that could back that up, but I don't see any time, point in wasting time on that. I think election day registration or same day registration on election day will be greatly reduced because of early voting. I believe that, they're going to come out Fairfield University or whatever is generally the people that are the ones that come out and do same-day registration. And that will be greatly reduced by the 14 days. I really think one location we want to have accuracy of the vote. And this is the first time doing it. There's going to be multiple ballots. It's better if everybody is in the same room and it's just more organized and we can control that. This is the first time really doing this with a higher volume.
Thank you. We're going to take the item to a vote. That we're voting on the amendment of Representative Steele. The vote is to, if you vote yes, you're voting on one, making the amendment to change it to one location. If you vote no, you're voting to keep it as is. You're not voting on the actual thing, but we're voting on the amendment. So we're going to take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are you getting everyone? Betsy? Keep your hand up. And then after she gets everyone in public, we'll just have those online mention their name. Oh, and actually, I apologize, Betsy. I was going to ask you a favor actually last time and I forgot. Is there any way you could read off, because the members online cannot hear who's voting for something. So when we split the vote like that, if you could just repeat like Representative Steele, Representative Astrida, that would be great so that members online and the public could hear who's voting for it or against it. Thank you.
In favor, Steele, Asterita, Longo, Spiricino, Britton, Colburn, Shea, Ludwigczak.
Did we miss anyone? Opposed?
No.
I'm going to just see if there's any abstentions. I'm going to see if there's any abstentions, and if not, we're just going to take the yeses and everyone else will be a no. Are there any abstentions? Seeing none, we'll wait for the clerk to total that.
Motion fails, 8 in favor, 23 opposed.
That motion fails. Now we're back to the original amendment. If anyone would like to speak to this, I would just ask the body that if you've already made a statement based on number, we've kind of avoid repetition. That would be greatly appreciated. But I do not want to anyone from speaking. So if anyone from the body would like to speak to the item that would like to raise your hand. Okay, anyone online? Did someone say yes? Representative Ludwigczak, I think your hand raised is old, but.
Yes, I apologize. I do not know how to remove it. I apologize.
All right, thank you, thank you. Seeing none from the body, we'll go back to members of the public. This time, you're commenting on the initial motion of 2. Again, if you've commented already, I ask that you don't repeat yourself, but feel free to come on up and state your name, address, 2 minutes. Seeing none, any online? Seeing none, we're going to take this to a vote. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Getting some feedback online? I thought you were online. Matt Ambrose, you're not muted. All right, Betsy, go ahead. And if you, again, I apologize, Betsy, but if you could just repeat the vote of the people in public. Thank you.
Ken Asterita, Peter Britton, Melissa Longo, Brooke Spiricino, Dave Rock, Pritchett, Jeff Steele, Cindy Waldron, Cindy Wapnitzky, Laura Carson, Michelle McCabe, Marcy Spalier, Liz Esma, Josh Garskoff, Kristen O'Neill, Sharon Pastilli, Jay Walk, Rob Blanchard, Nancy Donnie, Andrew Graceffa,
Yes.
Steve Barretts, John Delgado, Scott Nickel, Perry Burcham, Chris Carroll,
Yes.
Colin Colburn, Christine Ludwizak,
No.
Lisa Havey, Mark McDermott,
Yes.
Karen Wackerman, Matt Ambrose,
Yes.
Margaret Horton, Perry Burcham,
Yes.
thank you.
You can just list it off. In the future, we might want to, after each vote, just say no, like repeat their vote back, but I meant to bring that up last time, but sorry. We'll do that next time.
Motion passes 24 in favor, 8 opposed.
Thank you. We're gonna, I know we're hot on the topic of voter locations and everything, but we're gonna move back to item number, what item was that? I can't think of the item number, but to hear and consider upon the act of following reappointments to the FairTV Commission as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. We had separated the vote out, and now we're going to consider Paula J. Kokoza, Democrat, 251 Inwood Road, term July 2024 to 2027. We have a motion to approve. Representative Wackerman, seconded by Representative Rock. Ms. Kokoza, are you online?
No.
You just have to unmute yourself. Unfortunately, she logged on right at the beginning of our lengthy agenda item, so. Paula, if you're on the, if you're able to type in on the chat anything as well, that's another option. Are you calling her for Selectman Gerber? Hi, Paula. This is Marcy. How are you?
Hey, Marcy. I'm okay. How are you?
Thank you. I'm sorry for the difficulty. If you just want to tell us a little bit about why you want to continue to serve on the FairTV Commission, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, we've had the last 3 years have been really good and we've learned a lot. And I feel like, you know, at this point, continuing to serve the town in this way is something that I feel strongly about and I feel good about. And yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what else.
We appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to see if any of the members have any questions or comments. I see none. I just want to speak because I worked with you on the PTA at Stratfield School many, many years ago. So I will definitely vouch for you on that. Any members of the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, we're going to take it to a vote. Paula, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Paula, for your service, and thank you for being reappointed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night. All right, now we're going to move on to the supplemental warning. Number 18, resolved that in accordance with Public Act 23-5, an act implementing early voting, the representative town meeting of the town of Fairfield shall designate Old Town Hall as the polling location for early voting for the August 13th, 2024 Republican primary. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Wackerman, seconded by Representative Astorita. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, is there any public discussion on this item? Registrars, this would be your opportunity. I'll give you 5 minutes. If you need it, please don't take it.
Brevity is the soul of wit. I'll say my recommendation to the body was previously that we locate the site at the most central location that we could. Last week when I spoke to you, that was the synagogue or Hadash Synagogue. We have since found that the Fairfield Woods branch library has been willing to make the space available to us for voting there. So that is what I would recommend. It's much more centrally located for voters in the town, and so that is, I think, my main priority in terms of identifying a location. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Politi.
Thank you. I recommend Old Town Hall because it is familiar to the residents. We just had our last early voting there and it worked out fantastic. Our staff is located right nearby if there's any problems. The uncounted ballots and the voted ballots go right back downstairs. There's no need to transport them from one location across town. To me, Fairfield Woods doesn't make sense because not everybody knows that, but everybody knows where Town Hall is. And most people are very comfortable with Town Hall. We have the secure Connecticut voter registration on site already. It's a secure location. It's not disruptive to Town Hall business because it's on the second floor, which is mainly vacant. And the parking is sufficient. The busiest times, staff will not be there.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move back to the body. Is there any other comment from the body? Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. We're voting on the primary, August primary, having it at Old Town Hall. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That motion passes unanimously. To consider and act upon any other matters presented to said meeting and which may be properly acted upon under the rules of the representative town meeting. Are there any other matters? Seeing none, will Representative Walk is making a motion to adjourn, I hope, and seconded by Representative Blanchard. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
See you next month. There'll be a meeting, by the way.